My name's Carrie Carreño-Zingaro. I don't think I've met any of you. I'm the coordinator here for the ILC, the Individualized Learning Center, and so we do a lot of work with language, which is what we're going to talk about today. So today's topic is basically thinking about how we have to communicate, specifically in healthcare, but in any sort of job or day-to-day situation. We know, though, in healthcare, it's extremely important, both oral communication and written communication, because we have to be both clear and precise, right? We're communicating things like drug dosages. It's extremely important that things like that are communicated properly. Procedures, complaints of the patient. And so our communication skills are essential for wherever we are in the healthcare field. So since this is a global forum, we have a focus on issues, global issues. With our communication, these are often language issues. So common issues that we see between languages, and this can be if you're a second, if English is your second language, but also working with people and or patients who have, who for them English is their second language. So even if I'm a native English speaker, if I don't have issues with this, knowing what are common issues can help me communicate with other people. One of the common issues we see with international language issues are article usages, prepositions, and then those are the boring grammar stuff we'll talk about. The last thing we're going to do is a lot more fun, which are idioms. Articles, just to review, if anybody remembers what articles are in English, it's either a or the. What makes this difficult for a lot of second language speakers is that not all languages even have articles. So it's not always something that can be translated into English or from their language to English. The Chinese and Japanese do not have articles. Finnish languages and Slavic languages don't use articles at all. So being aware of that, when we're talking to people can be helpful. Just to review articles, the is something that we use with a noun when we're talking about something that's very specific and we can identify the noun that we're referring to. And a or an is something that will indicate an unidentifiable noun, something that's general or just one member of a group. So the difference here, right, please go get a patient versus please go get the patient. A is a very general article. You might say this if you're talking to somebody, just go get whoever's next in the waiting room. Just go get a patient. But if I say, please go get the patient, it's understood that I have a particular patient in mind that I want you to go get. There's a specific identifiable person that we're talking about. And so this may not be a critical situation of article usage, but it does change the meaning. Just a couple other examples. The, again, is a specific one. If I say I saw the most popular movie, there is only one movie that is the most popular at any particular time. So you have to use the. The dog that bit me just ran away. I know which dog just bit me. It was that one, right? It was a very particular one. Or if somebody yells, somebody call a doctor, right? I don't care which doctor you get, just go get help, right? So we use an indefinite article. Okay, questions on articles? All right. Prepositions. This is another very common issue between languages. Prepositions are things that are words that link nouns or pronouns or phrases to other words. They're basically used to describe the relationship between that noun and then other words. So our prepositions can be directional, showing where things are, if it's on something, if it's in something. They can be temporal, indicating time, some sort of time relationship. We're going, we have to be somewhere at a particular time. They can be spatial, showing relationships above or below or next to. The issue with prepositions, every language has prepositions. So that's not the issue with these. The problem is that English has an unusual amount of prepositions, more than other languages. The number of prepositions we have, it's immense. And so for somebody to learn all of these would be very difficult. So again, remember, whichever way you're going, if you're trying to put something in another language or you have somebody talking to you from their, who's non-native speaker, realize that this can be very difficult. These are some of our most common prepositions that we use in English. And you can see again, some of them are spatial, where they're indicating relationships between things. If you're beside something versus below and behind. Temporal, with time again, like after. I don't see another temporal one. Before. And hopefully one of the things that you're seeing from this is that these have one of the things is that the differences between these is not always very cut and dry. They're sort of, gradations of differences. How do you decide, when would you use like beside versus, is it just next to something? And figuring out those differences is not easy. The other thing with a lot of the prepositions is that not only are some of the differences in meaning not very obvious, but we have very particular ways of using them. We use them in combination with both verbs and adjectives in very particular ways, and using them out of those common practices just doesn't work in English. So this is something you might call a phrasal verb. This one is a verb plus a preposition, and depending on the combination of the preposition with that verb, it creates completely different meanings. We use care is the verb, but you can care about, you can care for, you can take care of. And they have different meanings and we use them differently. We care about usually things, situations. We can care about a person. But if we're caring about a person, that has a different meaning than caring for a person, right? Caring for can also have different meanings. So care about usually just means that you're concerned about this thing or person. If you're caring for them, that could mean that you're also just concerned. But it could mean that you are doing it. You are caring for them, which means you are taking care of them. It's an action. You may be helping them at home. It's something you're actually doing. And that's much more similar to take care of. But again, we wouldn't say take care for. They're just not interchangeable. And this is something that can be very difficult to understand. Likewise, prepositions are often used with adjectives. And again, they're very specific and they're going to change the meaning. Annoyed, you can be annoyed about or annoyed by something. You can be annoyed with someone or something. You can be annoyed at someone or something. But you're usually not going to be annoyed about someone or annoyed. I guess maybe we would, but generally they're used to mean very specific things. You're annoyed about an issue or about something. If it's a person, it's usually with or at. And they have slightly different connotations. Can you guys think of any others that that we use a lot where there's a lot of different combinations? Well, I could give you some examples, actually. What's next? All right, so adjectives that we use a lot of varieties. We can say we're ready for things or ready to. So you get ready for things, right? But you're ready to do something, right? They're very different and they're very specific. You don't use to or for with the opposite meaning. Putting these combinations together is what gives them meaning. Verbs and prepositions. Another common one that we use a whole lot, we have a whole lot of variety, is get. So we can get along with, we can get back from, we can get like married to a person, we can get rid of, we can get through with, get tired of, get used to. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 different prepositions that we can use with that verb, and they have very different meanings, right? We don't get married with a person. We get married to a person, right? They're very, very specific. So what I'm looking at up here is something that you're welcome to take. I'll have them up front at the end. These huge lists are some of the combinations of verbs and prepositions. Oh, these are both verbs and prepositions. Verbs and adjectives. Okay, they're each about 6 pages long. And this is something that English is particularly difficult about. We have so many prepositions that there's essentially no rules behind these. You just learn them and learn which combinations go with what. So if you'd like to take these lists on your way out, depending if, it's interesting to look for and, again, to be aware of the very specific usage of these and how it can change the meaning. Okay, so hopefully the whole idea that we're getting here is that words really do matter, and how we use words make a difference. There's also a lot of common usages that are just sort of characteristic for language that don't necessarily follow any grammatical rule. We say that people give birth, but they're in labor. There's not really a grammatical rule behind this. It's just common usage. This is what we say. We also use words, the same word, to have very different meanings. Some of these, like this one, is another verb and a preposition. But look at, we've used run in all 3 of these sentences, and it has very different meanings. We can run a fever. He's been running a fever for 3 days. You can feel run down, which means you're tired and maybe sick, right? This doesn't, if you're a non-native English speaker, I feel run down. I mean, that has, I'm going like down, I'm running down. I mean, it has no inherent meaning. I ran up and knocked you down. That one I might be able to figure out. But yeah, knocked down. Okay, I'm on the floor. To say something runs in a family. I'm running with my family. I mean, it is not something that translates. These 3 things fall in different categories. Again, this is probably a verbal phrasal verb. Some of these other ones come closer to another category that we call idioms. And this is what we're going to spend the rest of the time on because it's a lot more fun. Idiom is generally a phrase It is characteristic of a particular culture in what its meaning. And it's a phrase in which the words, when they're put together, have a completely different meaning than the words when they're by themselves. Like run down. Okay, running, you know, I can run, and then down is a direction. To feel run down, just, you know, you put those words together, you can't look them up in a dictionary and figure out what it means. That's an idiom. It's culturally specific. I pulled out a whole bunch of healthcare ones, as many as I could find. We draw people's bloods. I have no idea where this came from. I don't know if any of you do. But we're definitely not drawing blood, right? You are removing blood from somebody's vessel. But we don't go around and say, oh, I'd like to remove some blood from your arm. It what? Takes too long? Yeah. And that actually gets at a really good point. Idioms are something we use them a lot. They're culturally specific. In a lot of ways, though, they're kind of similar and fall into a similar category as slang. Slang is something, again, that is, you know, specific to the culture you're in. It's language specific. It often has no meaning based on the actual words, if we were to look up the dictionary definition. Yeah? Oh.
So it's slang.
We've shortened it. Will you withdraw her blood? That's good. Yeah, you're probably right. I'm sure you're right. Cool, so we know where that one came from. I'm going to draw your blood. So now we should all speak properly and say, I would please like to withdraw some of your blood. Right, and then they look at us kind of crazy.
This is kind of drawing water. I drew a bath.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Draw the water from the bath.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that comes from like drawing it up a well, but again, draw.
Yes, it's definitely not that.
So it's very strange. So an idiom is a specific grammar term that means two words put together that have a different meaning. But in this same category, I would put things like slang, especially slang and jargon that have to do with a particular discipline you're in. We all know that depending on our discipline, we have sort of, you know, our own internal language that we speak among ourselves. One of the things that we're not going to get to a lot today is that a lot of the slang, particularly, that we use on the job may have something to do, often can have something to do with the type of job we do. In healthcare, depending what type of healthcare you're in, you may be dealing with situations that are difficult. They can be personally difficult in the sense that you're dealing, you know, with very personal issues. They could be difficult because they are kind of difficult to deal with. They're unpleasant. In that sense, they also can be traumatic. And it's very human to use things like slang, technically improper language, because it essentially sort of lessens the seriousness of the situation. And we do this a lot in emergent or, you know, situations that it's a coping mechanism. One of the things that we have to remember is that improper language, technically improper language like slang, some idioms may not necessarily be appropriate outside of, you know, peer-to-peer usage. So we have to be very careful if we're using them among ourselves, you know, among peers, that doesn't move into a patient situation. So all of the idioms and things I have today are all very PG, but one thing I'd encourage you to do, just because it's interesting, is to look up slang and or idioms for your particular field. Nursing slang, it is not at all, a lot of it, PG. You would absolutely not want a patient to hear some of the things that, you know, nurses, and I'm not picking on nurses, it's just one I know, nurses, say to each other. And think of the situations that nurses often have to deal with. They're often very traumatic. They're difficult. It's a way of coping for people who have to deal with that all the time. Likewise, EMTs, right? It's an emergent situation. It's life or death. That's very difficult. So it's good to be aware of your language usage, where you're using it, and also just to be familiar with what it means. And to be aware, even if you're using PG language, being cognizant of your usage with patients. If you are talking to somebody who may not be familiar with an idiom, they're not going to understand you. So these are sort of the reasons that we have to be very clear and precise and as correct as possible when we are, communicating with others. Okay, so draw her blood. Here's a couple others. We fell ill. As far as I know, people don't fall down just when they get sick. A Charlie horse. Does anybody know where that one came from? Do you guys know what a Charlie horse is? How would you describe it? A cramp? I don't know why they're often in legs. It seems like they are. Again, I don't know if horses get them frequently, and there was a horse named Charlie. I mean, if you said that, if a patient came in and said, oh, I got a really bad Charlie horse, if it was an international nurse or something, somebody who wasn't familiar with our idioms, they might have they had a Charlie horse? Okay, to go under the knife. Again, I'm not exactly sure why we say under knives and not with them or on them. You're getting cut. Because it's what?
Usually you're under anesthesia.
You are, why do we call it under anesthesia?
Sleep.
You're asleep. Yeah. You get anesthesia. So that's another good one, actually. You go under anesthesia and you go under the knife. I don't know, maybe because you're lying down and people are over you, but it's typical usage and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Blind as a bat. That one might translate if other cultures think that bats are blind. They're definitely not blind. To be out cold. This one may not, I don't think that translates particularly well. To be cold is a temperature. Out cold, it is cold outside, but if I am out cold, it has nothing to do with my temperature, and I'm not outside, it doesn't work. A head shrinker, or shrink. Something else, I don't know what the history is behind this. Does anybody have a guess? Yeah, I have no idea. You guys remember what that's from? Yeah. The head shrinker guy? So a head shrinker or a shrink refers to a psychiatrist. No idea where that came from. Okay, so what I thought might be fun, hopefully. Have you guys ever heard of Balderdash, the game? Yeah? So Balderdash is a game where you're given unusual words, and they're often words that people have never heard of. And you're supposed to try to figure out the definition of this, really unusual word. If you actually know the definition, you get some points. But you also get points in the game for trying to come up with a incorrect definition that you can convince everybody else is true. So I thought it might be fun if we had like little groups and we could all play Idiom Balderdash. And we could come up with a few, we may know a lot of the meanings of these idioms, but if we don't, what would be really interesting is to think about how could they be incorrectly interpreted. Like, I fell ill, I'm feeling run down. It just, how would, if we said this to somebody who didn't understand it, what are they going to think? Okay, so do you guys want to? I don't know. Let's break up into how big is groups? 4, 5, smallish groups. First one, frequent flyer. A lot of you probably know what it means. But if you didn't know what it means, how could it be misinterpreted?
Well, how we explain it to international.
Yeah. If I can make this thing. Okay, who's got the actual definition? Anyone? Do you guys know what this means? Yeah. Okay. What does it mean to be if we call somebody a frequent flyer?
When he travels by plane.
Okay, what does it mean in a healthcare sense? If we call a patient a frequent flyer? Yeah. So the actual definition, right, is a frequent flyer is somebody who flies frequently. Yeah, what's your alternative? Oh, yeah, like a flyer. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's great. So you get flyers in the mail. You get them frequently. It's a frequent flyer.
In healthcare, oftentimes we use it in a very negative manner. Usually if you're working in the ED or something and you got this person who comes in every week or every other week and they're normally either drug seeking, attention seeking, hypochondriac, whatever, we say they're frequent flyer.
Yeah, they're coming back for things that aren't necessarily issues.
So you just, the do not mention list. We also used to call them Gomers. I don't know if anybody calls them Gomers anymore.
Oh, wow.
Is that an acronym?
Gomer, G-O-M-E-R. Get out of my emergency. Gomers. And then that was kind of synonymous with frequent flyers. The Gomers, frequent flyers. Yeah, with a negative connotation. For the most part.
Yeah, you don't call somebody a frequent flyer and it's not a compliment.
A lot of mean words.
All right, let's think of another one. Train wreck. Train wreck?
Normally they'll say
Okay, guys, so what's an actual train wreck? It's a crash, right? The train wrecked. It crashed. What's the meaning in a healthcare situation.
Mentally, physically.
She's a mess. She's multiple issues. Usually there's multiple issues, multiple diagnoses. We say that this patient is a train wreck.
Usually it may be surgical and medical, but usually we're talking about we try to treat one condition and it messes up the other condition. We're trying to treat their hypertension, but it puts them in kidney failure, and they have diabetes, so their kidneys were already bad.
So it becomes a train wreck because it's what happens when trains wreck?
All the cars collide.
The cars pile up on top of each other, right? Yeah, one after the other. So that's the idea. Saying somebody is a train wreck means, you keep doing something and the issues keep piling up. Again, this is not something that you want to say in the presence of somebody's family. Oh, your daughter's a train wreck. not a good idea. Yeah. All right, let's see if we can go. Oh, this one I thought of while we were talking. So frequent flyer, Gomer, get out of my emergency room. A bounce back. This is something that can be used idiomatically as a noun or a verb. So a person who is a bounce back is constantly returning. You often, I think this is in the ER, you release them and they come back with the same issue very soon afterwards. They're a bounce back. Or a what? A new one? Oh, yes. Yes, they may just be returning for other reasons. But this is something that could be used. You can say that you bounce back from an illness, and then it's good, right? Because it means that we're rebounding in a positive way.
I was run down, but I bounced back.
Right. Yeah. Right. I was run down, but now I've bounced back.
How to confuse individuals.
Yes. Somebody's going to be very, go to another country and
Right.
It's gonna make somebody
tell them that. Yeah. All right. Some of these are more obvious. What about, I'm sure we all know it, probably all know what this means, but what does it mean if you pass away? Right, so how is that going to be misinterpreted, though? You've just passed. Yeah, I passed away. If you tell somebody who's maybe not familiar with English idioms that your loved one has just passed away, well, then where are they? So where'd they go? Yeah. And that's something that could be easily misunderstood, too. So we have pass away, we have pass out. We also say passed on. Yeah. Which can, pass away and passed out are very different. And you want to be sure that we know which one of these is you're trying to communicate. Here's a couple that are similar. So see if you can think about what these mean and how these could be misinterpreted. They're very different. Out of shape and out of sorts. They're both out of things, but. So what does it mean if you're out of shape?
Not physically conditioned.
Right. So how could we
Really nice way to put that.
Right, well, the shape that you're supposed to be in. And I think it probably comes from literally this should be, I'm guessing, the shape of, a person and if you're out of that shape. But that's something that's very, again, we say out of shape. We don't say beyond shape or misshapen. Oh, that person's so misshapen. People really won't understand you if you say something like that, right? So it's very. So what about out of sorts?
Usually refers to behavior. She's been out of sorts lately.
Yeah.
Her normal or his normal mental.
Yeah. Have you all heard that one? That one's probably not as common. Yeah. So if you say, "Oh, I've been feeling out of sorts today," sort of what? Yeah, you're out of sort of, it's referring to not feeling well, I just don't feel like myself today. But how could that be misinterpreted? I actually don't know how it would be misinterpreted. It just doesn't seem like you could interpret it.
I mean, I wouldn't want somebody working on me that said they were out of sorts.
No, but think about what if a patient came and told you that?
They're out of sorts. They weren't feeling it.
Yeah. I mean, they may know the meaning, but what if somebody said it and they were using it incorrectly too, because they had misinterpreted it?
I would have to ask them,
Could you please define how?
could you please explain more?
Yeah, and that's one thing to think about is what would you do if you thought it could be something was being used incorrectly? Ask a question back using terms that can be easily defined. I don't know, something like a train wreck. Did the train actually wreck, or how are you having multiple issues? Okay, yeah.
Us saying it, if somebody says, I'm so out of sorts, and somebody else says, well, where do you get some sorts?
Where do you get some sorts?
Well,
That's
so
good.
where do
I'm
you
out
get
of
the
sorts. Oh, do you need some more?
That could
Yeah.
be some international.
That could be very confusing, yeah, because we say, oh, I've run out of paper clips, and that's another run, right? I've run out of things. Yeah,
I think another good example is if you've ever misinterpreted an email or a text message,
yeah,
or been misinterpreted, it's kind of the same thing.
it is.
Because we have trouble getting that point across.
Yeah, and so much of language is so context dependent. Okay, so I got some of these from people who are in the room. Does anyone want to suggest what's the craziest idiom you can think of based on your field and see if we all can figure it out?
I think it's the one Lee had, but I'll.
Well, I got some of those from him, actually. Lee, do you have any more you want to suggest that we can discuss in here?
A couple of the EMS ones we have, assume room temperature.
Assume room temperature. Has anyone heard that?
Taking on whatever.
And we were talking about, especially deaf, because it's so predominant with us. And a lot of times they use it in humor, but it's a defensive mechanism. Circling the drain. Dead right there.
Yeah, so circling the drain's a good one. Again, you don't want to use it in front of patients. You never heard that? You're about to die. You're about to go down the drain. Because we use these because of their informality, it lessens the seriousness. We use them, they're more fun, I guess. But it's. So if I said something, oh my gosh, they're about to die, that's much more serious than saying, oh yeah, he's circling the drain. It like brushes it off. It's by joking about it, it makes it less serious, and it's often used by people dealing with the situation.
So is it better to say those types of things in front of patients?
No.
Because I don't think it is.
No.
What about like a crown prep in dentistry?
Sometimes we'll say, Mr.
Crown prep?
A crown prep.
Yeah, I've heard.
That was
That
in our slang.
that's kind of a slang. Are you actually prepping a crown?
Well, you're prepping a tooth. That's how.
For a crown?
You're
Yeah.
preparing the tooth for this.
She said, I don't know her
Crown
name.
prep.
Crown prep was something, probably falls more under slang or jargon for the particular field. It's something that if you don't know what a crown prep is and you're not in this field, you wouldn't understand. But they're literally prepping a tooth to have a crown placed on it. And even the word crown. You're going to get a crown. You tell somebody that, they're really, it might take some more explanation. I don't know what they would call it in other languages. Yeah. Yeah. Just the word crown is a really good example. Other examples that people want to? He's what?
Oh, wow.
To remove a what? Oh, decay. Spoons.
Or excavators.
Yeah, okay, that one's different. So how do you use it?
You scoop.
No, I mean, how do you use it in a sentence? Like I'm gonna go spoon.
They'll just say, like, hand me the spoon. Hand me the spoon.
Oh, and it's not like a spoon.
A patient's gonna say,
Mm-hmm. So that's probably what? That's probably jargon, right? And so do you understand what jargon is? So jargon is language that is very specific to a field or a discipline, and usually will be understood by people within that discipline. Should be. But outside of that specific discipline, it won't be understood. So like, the crown example is something that could be misunderstood because of the language issue, but it also might not be understood outside of, even in, if you're outside of dentistry. Needing a spoon. It's not a spoon like the utensil we eat food with. I hope.
No.
It's something very different, probably not as pleasant.
Angled little shark.
Yeah. What about, so I've got a whole list of these medical and healthcare idioms. If you told somebody, an international, patient, somebody, a non-native speaker, that they looked fit as a fiddle, they may not know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So it's a fiddle. Do you look fit as a fiddle? It generally means that you're in good physical condition. If you're fit as a fiddle, I think it's an old.
It's the opposite of out of shape.
It's the opposite of out of shape. To be, let's see, alive and kicking, there's alive and well. Those you might be able to interpret. Alive and kicking. What about, we use the word to flare. Something can flare up. You can flare out. But the actual definition of the word flare it has to do with, what? Yeah, it has to do with, a flare is fire. It has to do with a bit of fire. So if you tell somebody that they may be, your mother's skin flared up again. Her arthritis flared up again. It doesn't have the same meaning. It just means that it showed up again, often suddenly. To have one foot in the grave. That's like circling the drain. Means you're close. You're on your last leg. That's a good one. Yeah, knocking on death's door. There's a lot of death ones. Notice that there are a lot of death ones, right? That has to do with the whole, we have so many of these, again, because it's trying to lessen the seriousness of the situation. Yeah, Tremaine. Be aware. Be aware of your language. It may not be appropriate to use with a patient or a family if it's a negative, you don't tell, doesn't matter if you're an native English speaker, you don't go up and tell a patient's family that they're circling the drain. It's disrespectful, right? Even if they know what you mean. But the other thing is, so that's a case where it would be inappropriate. But the other thing is to think about what is the situation, and when you need to be clear, are you using something that could be misinterpreted? So circling the drain, it has it's not appropriate, but it also could be easily misinterpreted. What is that? So part of all of this today is for us to be aware of both how we speak to other people and how other people communicate with us. And that in our healthcare situations, this is, it can be a critical issue rather than just kind of a misunderstanding. All right, do we have any other great ones we want to share, or should we sort of close it up? Yeah. Fun. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. We use kicking for, and they're very different. And kicking the bucket's another good one, too. That's old. I have no idea where that came from.
Maybe from people being hung when you kick the bucket out from under.
Oh. Oh, that's just not. Oh, that's true, too. The twitching could be kicking. Yeah. Definitely not a pleasant thing. Okay, so before we finish up, so I hope everyone's at least gotten the message, right, that we do need to be very careful. It's very easy to be misunderstood and for things to be easily miscommunicated. If you're interested in any more of this, Purdue OWL is a fantastic site for anything related to English. Grammar, writing, that's a perfect, it's our go-to resource. The University of Ottawa had a really nice resource. This is a huge list of American idioms, which are non-healthcare related, but there are 145 in here that may, again, not make a whole lot of sense, that are good just to look through and think how we could be using them. To drink like a fish, who wears the pants, pot calling the kettle black. I mean, these are not easily, his days are numbered. There's another sort of death one. Red tape. You have to deal with a lot of red tape at work. I can't process your healthcare, until, because there's so much red tape. They're just not obvious. That list is off of this site. And then if you have any other concerns about your grammar, if you want to review any grammar or ever want to review writing, that's what the ILC is for. So we can help. I know that there are papers for the dental programs. If you ever want us to help you review papers, that's what we're here for. So come in to the ILC. All right, so up front on your way out, if you would like, I have exercises on articles if you want to check how good you are at actually using articles. There are lists on, 2 different lists on prepositions, one with verbs, one with adjectives. There is also a 6 or 7 page list of medical and healthcare idioms that I could find. This one I would certainly think it's worth looking through. They're defined and used in a sentence. So you all are welcome to take whatever you'd like. On your way out, let me know if you have any other questions or concerns.